Well, my initial inspiration for this piece, for Cinderella, was the music of Prokofiev. That was the first thing that made me want to do it, really, was the music. And my first exposure to that was the Frederick Ashton ballet. I came to dance very late. I didn't start watching ballet at all till my late teens, and it was one of the first ballets that I saw that I really loved, and I sort of fell in love with that music. And that ballet was made in 1948, and a couple of years after the original premiere of the piece, the Prokofiev score. And it was, for me, music that conjured up a sort of atmosphere which was not completely fairy tale. And I knew I loved it and wanted to do something with it, but I didn't quite know what direction to go in. Then I read that it was actually written during the years leading up to its premiere, which was during the Second World War. It was probably shelved for a couple of years. If you then listen to it, which I did, with that period in mind, and with a lot of movies, wartime movies in mind, it does really sound like a film score of that era. A very good one, I have to say. High quality film score. But it's something about the music and that period really resonates very strongly. And so my first port of call, once I'd had that kind of revelation of that's what I wanted to do, to set it during that time, was to go to a lot of movies and things, which I was already a great movie fan, so I went to see, find a lot of movies which resonated with that story, and I found quite a few actually. The main one being Powell and Pressburger's Matter of Life and Death, which has a lot of the themes of this piece in it. It's nothing to do with Cinderella, but it is to do with people hovering between life and death, people getting lost, an angel coming down to look after someone, which is a very Cinderella theme, and that whole sense of people living for the moment, and we may all die tomorrow, let's dance. It had that kind of feel about it. So I think Prokofiev's music gives you that as well. It gives you that sense of bittersweet, which is so important for this period, and it's a score that begs you to see the story in a serious light. It's interesting because a lot of people think of Cinderella as a pantomime or a Disney cartoon or something that's fun, simple story. Actually, what the Prokofiev music does is gives it enormous depth of feeling, and that is what makes this version of the story very unique. And of course, lots of other movies of that era helped with different aspects of the story. It's a very easy show to do the research for, and very helpful for the dancers as well to be able to familiarise themselves with that period. I mean, I forget sometimes, it's so long ago for many of them. Many of them may not have had that kind of background either in their schooling or they may not be familiar with the films. So it's a very good way to get into period detail. Well, the story of Cinderella is one of those stories that's very good for adaptation, and that partly because in any field. Partly because it's a story that everyone knows. It's one of the most well-known stories. You'd be hard-pushed to find anyone who didn't have a vague idea of what that story is. So for dance theatre, where you're not using words, it's very good for adaptation because people already know aspects of it. Setting it during the London Blitz is not that bizarre an idea because there have been so many versions of Cinderella in different settings, in different periods. So it's, for me, the reason for setting it at that period was just how well the opportunities it gives for storytelling. For me, the image of the shoe, the discarded shoe in the rubble of the Blitz said everything. It was about especially a glittery shoe or a glass slipper or something, it's sort of something about that is very sort of hopeful in a way amongst the rubble, but also it suggests that someone has gone missing, and the story is all there almost in that one image. So it was a story that sort of went well with the period that we were setting it in the sense that it's about someone who does go missing. It's about escapism. The rags to riches aspect of Cinderella is very clear in the story, really. But that idea of a young girl who is into escapism through movies, and that was the big way in which people used to escape. Cinemas were never as popular as they were during the Second World War. Cinema going was never as popular because it brought people together as well, was the other thing, which was a very big aspect of wartime experience. So all those things were great for this story. It was about people, about real people, about families, about winning through. And we even have a sort of what we call the victory dance at the end of our show, which is sort of our curtain call really, but it, you know, at the end of the war has come, and what has it done to people? How have they changed during that period? I think when I first look at a story, a particularly well-known story, and I'm trying to think of a different way of telling that story, or a way that maybe resonates with a modern audience, or that just does something a bit different with the story to make people think about it in a different way. One of the first things I do is ask myself the question, and what sex should this character be? You know, does it have to be female? Does it have to be male? Would it be better in this context if it was a little different in some way? I usually have a reason for it. If I do change the gender of a character, I don't tend to do it for no reason. I usually have a thought behind it, or an inspiration behind it. I thought about the character of the fairy godmother, and I just couldn't imagine her in this piece with a big dress and a wand or something. I don't know, I couldn't think of an image for it. And then I remembered various movies that have angels in. And if you think about guardian angel, seemed to be much better for Cinderella, female lead character, with a guardian angel who was male rather than a female guardian. And I thought, well, that's interesting, because he's almost like a father figure to this young girl. And I remembered movies like The Bishop's Wife with Cary Grant, who's an angel. He doesn't look like an angel, he doesn't have wings or anything, he happens to be an angel. There's also the great Christmas film, It's a Wonderful Life, where James Stewart is guided by an angel, in a sense of it being a little bit like A Christmas Carol, you know, Dickens. And there's a couple of others as well, and Fred Astaire actually has played an angel a couple of times in a film called Daddy Longlegs. He plays an angel at one point. And so I thought, oh, there's some sort of dance aspect there that's interesting, and there's also something that really works for me as a story, a strong story idea. So we changed the fairy godmother into what we call the angel, and he's a guardian angel. And he's a magical figure, very clearly so, I think, in our version. And people are waiting for that moment. You know, that's the thing that's really helpful with Cinderella. When he appears, nobody's saying, who's he? They're all going, oh, the fairy godmother's a man. You know, they're waiting for that to happen. They know it's going to happen. So it's very easy. You don't have to explain it too much. And interestingly, in our piece, he's not all necessarily for good. He's a fate figure. He represents fate, very important at this time. He basically does guide her to good things, but she has to go through quite a lot to get there. He doesn't make it easy for her. He doesn't necessarily always help her avoid difficult situations. And there's a scene in Act 3, at the beginning of Act 3 of our version, where he's almost like the angel of death. You know, someone decides who the next set of people are that are not going to survive that night, you know, and he becomes a little bit like that figure. He sort of almost points at people and says, you're next. And so his role in the piece changes throughout, but he's also there to support the people who do win through, and he basically looks out for her and does make sure she has a happy ending. This theme of conflict is quite strong in this piece, partly because we're in a period of conflict, we're in the war, but also the conflict of the family against each other, and Cinderella as well as a sort of stepsister, that conflict that goes on. and also the conflict of participating in the war effort or not, you know, those sort of things, the consciousness of that. There's lots of aspects to the story that resonate with that period, but that are also there already, I think. You know, the winning through of someone to achieve something that you hope for them. But for me, it's beyond that. It's always been about how love can kind of win through, and how it can overcome adversity. And that's what the story's about as well, I think. It's about fighting for that. And using it as your inspiration to carry on. I think that's a very important aspect of this story. Well, when I first read about the Café de Paris bombing, it seemed like such an incredible idea for this piece, because a terrible incident that happened when people were dancing on the dance floor. There was a band playing, people having a great time in a sort of cellar bar, as it was then, as a very upmarket, of course, Café de Paris. People dressed glamorously, dressed beautifully, dancing together to sort of wonderful swing music, I expect, you know. And on this particular night, it received a direct hit from two bombs. Many people were killed, some survived. And I thought, isn't that interesting that we tell the story of a night of the Blitz in our piece, and Cinderella is so much about going to the ball. It's all about going to somewhere wonderful and glamorous. And then I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if our ballroom initially was a bombed ballroom that then, through this angel figure that we have, is like a guardian angel, is brought back to life. We rewind time to bring these people back to life, to the situation that they were in before this happened. And it's slightly nightmarish, slightly surreal in a way, but adds such a sense of the sense of doom that was around at that time, could be, but also that sense of people rising above that. And it could be your last night on earth, let's dance till we drop, you know, and let's have that. We do really talk about that quite a lot in rehearsals, and about how everything is a little bit heightened because of that, the passion, the need for a good time, the desire to meet people, the desire to come together and make that significant, not just a fleeting thing, but people falling in love very quickly. All those things. It's so right for this story, and such a lovely thing to play with as well. And that incident in particular touches you when you hear about it, and it's so, because it was people dancing, you know, and that's what we do. You have to imagine yourself as an audience member all the time, really. I feel that that is the reason for doing it. So it may sound extraordinary to say that in a way, but a lot of people don't think like that. You know, if we're not communicating to the audience, what is the point of being here? I am always looking from the point of view of, did I get that if I don't know what this story is, if I don't know what this, if I can't apply my knowledge of it, because I know where I'm looking and everything. I have to see whether it makes me look where I want people to look and things like that. So I'm constantly thinking of putting myself in the position of an audience member who knows nothing at all. I assume they've read nothing, seen nothing. Here we go. Well, I've always thought of the work as being many layered, and that my first thing I have to do is to tell the story to a person who knows nothing about it. And that could be a young person, or it could be a person of any age, actually. If they're new to dance, or they've never heard of this film or this story or before, you've got to assume nothing. So that's that person. But then there are many other layers of sophistication that you can put on top of that, that I like people to get if they know it. There's lots of references in the work all over the place to things from cultural references, characters, old movies, theatrical things, old ballets, dance styles, history. If you can see those things, and it's quite nice to have that acknowledgement, and it connects you with the piece in a different way, in in a very strong way, you know, oh, I got that, and oh, most people wouldn't get that, but I got it, kind of thing. I like all those things in there as well, so that you're playing to someone who does have a lot of knowledge maybe, or if it's one of the classics, you know, that they've seen every version of it going, and now you want to show that you really know it well. I want to show them that I know this piece really well, and I've done this for a reason, and I've used that piece of music there for a reason, and so I want to please those people as well. But it also needs to be understood on a very basic level as well, you know. So it's always been a tightrope, particularly as most of the pieces that I do are much loved pieces already. For some people, you know, they're either very famous films or very famous ballets or books or whatever it may be, or a piece of music that people absolutely love, you know, and don't do that, you know, don't tamper with it, don't, you know, all those things you're dealing with. Even the musicals I've done as well, I've only done very popular, famous musicals, really, Mary Poppins, My Fair Lady, Oliver. Those are all pieces that people absolutely love. You know, they don't want to see something that's messed with too much. So you've got to judge what you do with something, and what you want people to say at the end of it was, I love that piece that I've seen before, but I also love what you've done to it, you know, and acknowledged what I loved about it. But I think what's happened over the years is people now expect me to do something different. They don't come expecting it to be like what they already know, and they really don't want that. They want it to be different, and they want to know what you're going to do with it.